We will now look at service report for general population and health disparities. We will first review student services report. There are 3 areas you will be reporting on for student services: services provided, overall program reach, and reflections and insights on student services. We will look at each of these individually. For services provided, services listed are those proposed in your program plan. Please note that any work that has been entered and or saved in your progress report can be lost if a program plan revision is submitted and approved during the progress reporting period. We strongly encourage services to be reviewed before information is entered and or a program plan be completed if applicable for the corresponding year. Services listed are those applicable to your Year 1 program plan. Services are listed in order of service type and population. Measurable outcome will display when an outcome is selected as you work through each service, as well as the total participation. This number is the number of students who completed participation in the specific service. You have the option to expand all services or work through each one individually in no particular order. When a service is expanded, you will see the service description and the measurable outcome pre-populated or auto-populated from what was entered in your program plan or application. We will now review service types and what you will need to report on for prevention, intervention, cessation, and youth development. For prevention and also youth development services, these are quite similar. In prevention and youth development services, you will find instructions for measurable outcomes, total participation, and measuring participation. You have the option to expand or collapse these instructions to your liking. Instructions will provide you with detailed guidance on what should be entered in these fields. For measurable outcome, you have 3 options: met, not met, and partially met. If a measurable outcome was met, no further action is needed. However, if a measurable outcome was not met or partially met, you will need to briefly explain why that measurable outcome was not met or partially met. For total participation, please enter the total number of participants per grade. All grades are listed even if not all grades received the service. You'll also need to enter brief details on how you measured participation for this service. For health disparity populations, it's a little bit different when it comes to prevention in health disparity. You'll still need to enter information on whether or not you met your measurable outcome, total participation, and also brief details on how you measured participation. For health disparity populations, all disparity populations identified in the application or program plan will be displayed. However, if a disparity population that was not previously identified received the service, then you'll have the option to add that other disparity group. By checking the other disparity group, checking off Add Other, and then entering the other disparity group name, and then clicking on Other, will display that other disparity in the other disparity group. You can also remove any disparity group that was entered by clicking on the X to remove them. Once the information is entered for prevention and or youth development services, you can save that information. For intervention and cessation services in general populations, just like in prevention and youth services, you will need to enter or report on your measurable outcomes, service participation, and measuring your participation. For service participation, you'll also need to enter those grades that were identified as needing intervention and the number that completed intervention for each grade individually. If there were challenges in tracking service participation, you'll have the option to select Need Further Assistance in Tracking Service. And then you'll need to enter a brief explanation on how you will establish tracking for student intervention services in the next program here. The same for cessation in general populations. You will need to enter the amount per grade of those who were identified as needing cessation and those who completed cessation. And if you weren't able to track participation or service participation for these grades, you can select Need Further Assistance in Tracking Service and provide a brief description on how you will establish tracking for student cessation services in the next program here. For health disparity populations, for intervention and cessation services is a little bit different. The only difference from reporting for intervention and cessation services in health disparity is in service participation. The service participation will be reported on an overall basis instead of by individual disparity group. However, if you would like to identify a disparity group that was not previously identified in your program plan or application, you can enter that disparity group here and click on Other. So that disparity group can also be identified as one who received this service as well. Once you enter the information, please save. We will now move on to the overall program reach. For overall program reach, it is important to complete information about each service above before working on the overall program reach section. In the overall program reach tables, services provided will be pre-populated for both general population and health disparity populations. Total enrollment will also be pre-populated from the application program plan. Numbers for each service and grade or health disparity group are pre-populated from the total participation from the service report above. You will need to enter your best estimate on the total number of students who receive a TUPE service. Information on how to provide a best estimate can be found on the webinar on progress report. The percentage will be auto-calculated for you. You will also have an area to enter any additional information that will help interpret the data entered in the overall program reach tables. The last item in student services is reflections and insights. Here, the TUPE office would like for you to reflect and share any insights, major accomplishments, challenges, and improvement actions for the next year. If any of the reflections or insights reported apply to health disparities, please click on Check if applicable to health disparities. That way, we know that any major accomplishments, insights, or successful practices or challenges or improvement actions are relevant to your health disparity groups. Once all information has been entered, be sure to click on Save, and the lead applicant can check off, I have reviewed and verified the content in this section.